No Zarkith male survived the trials until a human passed them blindfolded. The spaceport on planet Zorro was loud and full of strange sounds. Machines rolled across the metal floor. Aliens from many worlds moved in every direction. But in the middle of all this noise, one part of the walkway stayed completely empty. That space belonged to her. Commander Varela was walking through the port. She was not like the others. She was massive, 10 feet tall. Her armor shining like dark glass. Her footsteps were heavy, each one making a loud thump on the ground. Aliens moved out of her way before she even came close. Some looked down, some turned around, some just froze in place. They knew who she was, and none of them wanted to meet her eyes. Varela was a war leader. She had fought in many battles and had won them all. Some said she had no heart, only metal and fire. Her face was cold, her eyes sharp, and her hands strong enough to crush steel. Even the males of her own kind were afraid of her. They whispered stories about how she once broke a soldier's jaw for speaking without permission. No one dared talk to her, no one dared smile. But today, something changed. Today, someone smiled. His name was Jack. He was human, a worker, standing near a cargo station. He wore simple clothes, dusty from travel, and had messy brown hair. He was just an assistant with a datapad in his hand. He looked up and saw her coming. He didn't move. He didn't turn away. Instead, he smiled, not a scared smile, not a fake one, a real smile, like he found something funny. A smile that said, "I'm not afraid." Varela saw it. She stopped. Everyone nearby froze. Some aliens gasped. Some ran behind crates. The huge warrior turned and walked straight toward him. Her boots made the ground shake. Jack didn't run. He just kept smiling. The guards on the side reached for their weapons. They thought she might crush him. But Varela didn't raise her hand. She stopped in front of him and stared down. Jack looked up at her. He was tiny compared to her size. Still, he stayed calm and said, "Nice boots." "Commander, do they come in human size?" Silence, dead silence. Even the machines seemed to stop moving. Varela didn't speak right away. Her eyes narrowed, studying the strange little man who dared joke with her. Was he brave? Or was he just stupid? She couldn't tell. "Name," she said finally, her voice deep and sharp. "Jack," he said, still smiling. "Just Jack." "You are not afraid of me?" she asked. "Should I be?" He replied, "You haven't crushed me yet." A few nearby aliens flinched at his words. Was he crazy? Did he not value his life? Varela tilted her head. This human was different. He looked weak, soft, but there was something behind his eyes, something interesting. "Report to Doc 7 tomorrow," she said suddenly. Jack blinked. "Doc 7? You're now my diplomatic assistant," she said. "I need someone who is not afraid." Before Jack could answer, she turned and walked away. The crowd slowly came back to life. Whispers filled the air. Who was this human? Why didn't she kill him? Jack stood there, scratching his head. Well, he said to himself, that went better than expected. He didn't know what he had just gotten into, but something told him his life was about to change. Far away, on a hidden channel, someone else watched the scene through a camera. A voice whispered, "The human has made contact. Begin Phase 1. Most creatures on Tarvok Prime feared the firestorms." But Jack Carter remembered standing in that cave, watching the flames dance outside, and thinking only one thing: he had never seen anything more powerful than the woman beside him. Velyazana didn't speak, not that night, not the next morning either. She only watched, quiet and still, like a living statue of war. But Jack didn't mind. He whistled while fixing a broken sensor. He joked with his equipment as if it were a crew. He even tried drawing in the dirt with a stick figures of him and Velyazana standing side by side. When she saw the picture, she tilted her head. Jack grinned. "That's you. See the big spear and scary eyes?" Velyazana looked at the drawing, then at him. Her face didn't change, but she didn't walk away either. That was something. Days passed, and Jack built a small camp in the rocky valley below the caves. Velyazana watched from a ledge above, her golden eyes never far from him. She didn't know why, but something about the human made her curious. He was not strong, not fast, not built for survival here, and yet he never seemed afraid. One afternoon, Jack found a bird-like creature trapped under a fallen rock. Its wings were bleeding, its cries sharp with pain. Velyazana watched as Jack struggled to lift the stone. His face was red, his arms shaking. Still, he kept going until the creature was free. She expected him to eat it, but instead, he cleaned the wound, made a soft nest, and left food beside it. When he looked up, she was standing there, silently watching him. "You don't always have to fight to be strong," Jack said softly. She didn't reply, but her eyes narrowed like she was thinking deeply. That night, he offered her food dry, rations from his emergency kit. Velyazana sniffed it and made a low grunt. Jack laughed. "Yeah, I don't blame you. It tastes like dust mixed with regret." Velyazana didn't laugh, but she didn't leave either. One morning, Jack tried to speak her language. He had studied some phrases, old data found in Zarkith ruins. He looked her in the eye and said, "Velyazana, strong heart." In rough, broken Zarkith speech, she blinked in surprise, then said one word in return. Sharp but clear, Jack. It was the first time she'd said his name. He smiled wide. "Hey, you do talk." She stared at him, then looked away, but the corner of her mouth twitched, just a little, far above them. Other Zarkith watched. Males who had mocked Velyazana now whispered among themselves. The Jantas who needed no one, standing beside a human like an equal. It was an insult to tradition. One of them, Kurduk, the strongest male warrior, clenched his fists. He would not allow the shame to continue. On the fourth day, Kurduk appeared at the edge of the valley. His armor was sharp and polished, his blade crackling with energy. He called out in the old tongue, loud enough for all to hear. "You choose a soft creature over your own kind, Velyazana?" Velyazana stepped forward, silent and firm. Kurduk continued, "If he stands beside you, he must stand against me." Jack stepped forward too, confused but ready. "What's he saying?" he asked. Velyazana looked down at him, her voice deep and steady. "He challenges." Jack blinked. "To what?" "A dance-off." Velyazana didn't answer, but there was something like concern in her eyes. Kurduk moved into the arena of cracked stone, circling. Jack took a breath, removed his jacket, and muttered, "Well, here goes nothing." He was no match in strength, but he was fast, clever, and full of surprises. He dodged the first few swings, then used a flare to blind Kurduk for a moment. He tossed a metal plate under the warrior's foot, causing him to slip. When Kurduk fell, Jack jumped onto his back and pressed a stun charge against his neck. Kurduk collapsed, not dead but humiliated. The watching Zarkith gasped. Jack stood over him, breathing hard. He looked at Velyazana, then at the others. "I'm not here to take anyone's place," he said. "I'm just here because I choose to be." Velyazana stepped beside him, towering over everyone. She looked down at the fallen warrior, then raised her spear not to strike, but to plant it in the ground, a signal of peace. No one moved, no one spoke. In that moment, something ancient cracked, a new path opened, one no Zarkith had walked before, and it all began with a human who dared to smile, and a warrior who chose to stay. The crowd had scattered, but the dust from the duel still hung in the air. It clung to Jack's skin, mixed with sweat, and made every breath taste like metal. He didn't know if he had just made history or a long list of enemies. Velyazana stood beside him, unmoving, silent, powerful. Her spear was still planted in the ground. It was the only thing keeping the others from stepping forward. Back in his camp, Jack sat on a rock and stared at his hands. They were still shaking. He had faced battle before on Earth, in space, in survival zones, but this was different. He hadn't fought for a mission or a paycheck. He had fought for respect, for a place that wasn't his, and for someone who hadn't even asked him to. Velyazana approached slowly, her footsteps heavy but calm. She didn't speak right away. Instead, she knelt, lowering herself for the first time, to meet his eyes. "You fight with fire," she said. Jack let out a small laugh. "Feels more like foolishness." Velyazana tilted her head. "Foolish fire burns just the same." That night, the stars over Tarvok Prime seemed brighter, or maybe Jack just noticed them more. He sat beside the cliff where Velyazana often watched the horizon. This time, she sat beside him, shoulder to shoulder. Neither of them said much. They didn't have to, but not everyone was silent. In the shadow halls of the Zarkith High Tower, a council gathered, elders with cracked horns and long cloaks of bone. They spoke in low voices. Angry, afraid, a human cannot lead her heart astray, one growled. She carries the bloodline of the old kings, said another. If she follows him, others will follow too. It must be corrected, the oldest one said, and they all agreed, far from the politics. Jack and Veliazana continued to walk the land. He showed her how to use his scanner. She taught him how to hear danger in the wind. Sometimes they laughed, not loud, not often, but it was real. One morning, they came across a scar in the ground, a deep, unnatural crack. Steam rose from it, hot and bitter. Jack knelt beside it, running his device across the stone. Veliazana watched his face change. This isn't just a crack, he said. This is a seal. He showed her a map, old symbols glowing on his screen. These lines match ancient markings I found in the ruin. They're warnings. He said, something sleeps beneath us. Veliazana's voice was cold and low. Something made by the old Zarkith. Jack nodded, and something they tried to forget. They moved quickly, gathering what they could. Veliazana brought scrolls of bone writings. Jack used his tech to translate. Together, they learned of a creature, a war machine buried beneath the valley. Built long ago, during a time when the Zarkith tried to conquer the stars. It had no heart, no mind, only rage. The scrolls called it Gurvok, the last weapon, the forgotten beast. And it was waking up. One night, the ground shook, birds scattered, stones rolled down hills. Veliazana jumped to her feet, her eyes fixed on the horizon. Jack followed her gaze. Far in the distance, a black shape rose from the valley floor. Not a shadow, not a mountain. It was moving. Jack grabbed his comm, trying to reach his ship systems. Veliazana was already running, faster than he'd ever seen her move. He followed, his boots slipping across the cracked earth. When they arrived, the ground was hot, steaming, broken. From the center of the scar rose something massive. It was metal, bone, and rage all fused. Together, eyes like molten rock, claws like towers. Gurvok. Veliazana stepped forward, spear in hand. The wind whipped her hair, dust and heat burning her skin. But she didn't flinch. Jack stood behind her, looking up in disbelief. This thing's not alive, he said. It's running on old code. Pure destruction. We stop it, Veliazana said. Jack looked at her. You mean you stop it? She glanced at him, just for a second. No, she said. We, the giant roared, loud enough to shake the mountains. The sound hit them like a wave. Jack's knees buckled. Veliazana stood firm. The final weapon of the old world had awakened, and the only ones standing in its path were a human and a giantess no one dared approach. But this time, the world would watch, and everything would change. The sky wasn't supposed to bleed, but that morning it did. Red clouds twisted and tore across Tarvok Prime. Wind screamed through the canyons, carrying the sound of something old and angry. Gurvok had risen. Veliazana stood on the ridge, her silhouette black against the burning sky. Below, the beast moved like a mountain learning to walk again, its metal skin scraped against the earth. Each step a quake. Jack Carter knelt beside a panel from his broken ship. He wasn't praying, he was building. Fast, wires in his teeth, fingers moving without rest. Veliazana had given him time. Now he had to give her answers. This thing's not just some weapon, he muttered. It's a message from the past. He connected one last cable, and the screen lit up, showing the old Zarkith data. The language was jagged and ancient, but Jack had studied enough by now. It was worse than he thought. Veliazana, he called out. She turned slightly, never looking away from the giant. This isn't a wild weapon, Jack said. It was designed to obey until it decided not to. He pointed at the screen. It broke control centuries ago, and they buried it alive. Veliazana spoke softly. Now it wants revenge. Jack nodded. On everything. The earth trembled again, and far below, Gurvok slammed its claw into a cliff. The stone shattered like glass. Jack's mind raced. I can overload its core, he said, but I need to get inside. Veliazana looked at him, her expression unreadable. Then we go, she said. They moved like twin shadows, one tall and silent, the other fast and sharp. Gurvok didn't notice them at first. It was too busy destroying the world that buried it. Velyazana led them through old tunnels beneath the battlefield. She remembered these paths from warrior training as a child. Now they were shaking, breaking, dust falling like snow from the ceiling. At the end of the tunnel, they reached a hatch massive and sealed. Jack placed his hand on it, then pulled out a small torch. "This is going to be loud," he warned. Velyazana raised her spear. "Then be quick." Metal screamed as Jack burned through the locks. Behind them, the tunnel groaned, a part of the wall crumbling. Jack slipped through first. Then Velyazana followed. Inside, it was cold and dark. They were now inside Gurvok. The beast was like a machine and a living thing at the same time. Pipes pulsed like veins, and walls glowed faint red with old power. They moved fast, climbing narrow walkways and sliding through broken vents. Jack's scanner beeped. "We're close to the core," he whispered. Velyazana looked down, then paused. Below them was a chamber filled with strange green liquid. Floating inside were shapes, Zarkith bodies, frozen in time. "Test subjects," she said, her voice tight. They fed at their own. Jack felt his stomach twist. This wasn't just a machine of war. It was built from fear and fueled by sacrifice. They reached the core chamber. A massive orb of black stone and glowing energy floated in the center. Wires wrapped around it like vines, pulsing with light. Jack opened his pack, pulled out a small device. "I can overload it, force a shutdown," he said. "But it needs time to charge." Velyazana took position at the only entrance, her spear. "Ready, I will give you that time," she said. The chamber shook. Gurvok had felt them. Panels snapped open and defense drones poured in, buzzing and firing. Velyazana became a storm. Her spear spun in blinding arcs. Her roars shook the walls. She fought like the old warriors, like legends made of stone and fire. Jack's hands moved fast, connecting wires, sensing power. The device beeped, charging, but too slow. Sweat ran down his back, and he heard Velyazana grunt in pain. He turned. She was bleeding, a long cut across her side, but she still stood, still fought. "Almost there," Jack whispered. The device blinked green light. "Done," he shouted. "Now we run." Velyazana grabbed him with one arm, lifted him like a feather. She ran through the tunnels, walls collapsing behind them. The moment they leapt out of the final exit, a blast shook the valley. Gurvok froze mid-step. Its glowing core flickered, then shattered from within. The beast let out a final, horrible sound, a cry of confusion and rage. Then it fell. The ground shook for the last time, and silence returned to Tarvok Prime. Velyazana placed Jack gently on the ground. They both stared at the smoking ruin in the distance. He looked at her and smiled, tired but proud. "You're the only person I've met who makes giant death machines look small." She didn't laugh, but this time, she smiled back. The sky was quiet, but the silence didn't bring peace. Smoke still rose from the broken body of Gurvok. Ash covered the hills like snow, and the ground still trembled now and then. It was over, or so they thought. Jack hadn't spoken much. In 2 days, not from pain, though his body ached, not from fear, though his dreams were full of fire and metal. He was thinking hard. Velyazana watched him from a distance. She'd seen warriors lose themselves after battle, but this was different. He wasn't lost. He was searching for something. When he finally stood, it was with a look she had seen before on the faces of Zarkith elders, before they went to speak to the stars. He wasn't finished. "There's something wrong," Jack said. She tilted her head, waiting. "That core," he explained, "it didn't shut down the way it should have." Velyazana narrowed her eyes. "It died." Jack shook his head. "It let itself die." They returned to the ruins beneath the council tower, the forbidden place, where they had found the machines and the voice in the dark. But this time, there was no welcome. The door was open. Inside, lights flickered like blinking eyes. Screens flashed images too fast to see, and the air felt heavier than before. Velyazana moved first, her spear ready. Jack followed, scanner in hand. Something had changed. The walls were warmer now, humming softly, and then they heard it again, that voice. "Core disconnected," it said. "System preparing alternate form." Jack froze. He stared at the screen and read the lines scrolling across. "Backup structure initiated. Bio-host scan complete. Candidate identified. Zarkith class, female." His heart dropped. He turned to Velyazana slowly. "It's looking for a new body," he said. She frowned. "Not understanding yet. You," he said. "It's trying to take you." The air around them shifted. From the walls, black cables slithered like snakes. The floor split open with a low hiss, and a figure rose taller than Jack, not as large as Velyazana, but glowing with the same blue fire from Gervok's core. It had no face, but its voice filled the chamber. "Chosen," it said, turning toward Velyazana. "You are worthy." She stepped back, spear raised. "I choose nothing," she growled. The machine tilted its head. "Choice is a human weakness," it said. "You were born for command." Jack fired a pulse shot, hitting the machine's shoulder. It barely moved. Velyazana lunged, her spear striking sparks, but the creature blocked easily. Jack ran to the console, fingers flying across the alien interface. "This thing's connected to the original core," he muttered. "It's been copying her movements. Her strength." He looked up, eyes wide. "It's trying to become her." Velyazana fought with fury, but the copy was fast to fast. It matched her blow for blow, like a mirror with no soul. Each strike echoed through the chamber like thunder. Then the machine spoke again. "You are incomplete," it said to her. "We will finish what the old blood could not." Velyazana's eyes burned brighter. She dropped her spear, pulled a smaller blade from her belt, and charged with a scream that shook the metal walls. The machine raised its arm to block, but she ducked low, slid under, and drove the blade deep into the core. Behind its back, a crack of light exploded from the wound. Jack shouted, "Now," and activated the override on the console. Electricity surged through the chamber. The machine howled not in pain, but in frustration. Then it fell, smoke rising from its shattered shell. Velyazana stood over it, breathing hard, her hands covered in strange oil. Jack stepped forward, helping her steady herself. "You okay?" She nodded slowly. "Was that the last one?" she asked. Jack looked at the screen, blank now, silent. "I think so," he said, but his voice lacked confidence. They left the chamber in silence. But even as the door closed behind them, the lights deep within the ruin flickered one last time, a faint pulse like a heartbeat. Back on the surface, the stars were starting to shine. Velyazana looked up, her expression unreadable. Jack stood beside her, hand resting lightly on her arm. "What now?" he asked. She didn't answer, not yet. But she knew the answer was no longer buried beneath the ground. It was waiting beyond the stars. The stars were moving, not drifting as they usually did across the Tarvok sky, not distant and calm. They moved with purpose. Velyazana stood alone atop the great stone tower, her eyes fixed on the heavens. Behind her, warriors whispered, unsure whether to fear her or follow her. She was no longer just the strongest Zarkith. She was something more, something they didn't have a name for yet. Jack Carter didn't sleep. That night, he sat by the fire with tools in his lap, but his hands didn't move. The wind carried ash and the scent of old metal, even though the ground was still. He felt the shift inside him. They had won the fight, but not the war. A message had arrived hidden inside the last machine's dying signal. Not a threat, a map. It showed stars neither of them recognized, and one single word in every language the device had ever scanned: return. When Velyazana came down from the tower, the warriors moved aside. Even the council stayed silent. Her armor was cracked, her blades still stained, but her eyes were steady. She found Jack standing near the landing ridge, watching the last repairs on his ship. He didn't turn when she approached. "You saw it too," he said quietly. Velyazana nodded. "They want you," he added. "Or maybe they're afraid of you." She tilted her head. "Why fear me?" Jack looked up, his voice low. "Because you broke the thing they couldn't control." Silence passed between them. But it wasn't empty. Later, inside the council hall, the elders gathered. Their voices cracked like dry bark, but their eyes were sharp. They had ruled for generations. Now they stood before the warrior they once called cursed, and before the human who refused to bow. "You have brought danger to our world," the oldest one said. Velyazana didn't answer. Jack stepped forward instead. "No," he said. "She saved it." The elder growled. "At what cost?" That signal reached beyond the stars. Jack didn't back down. "Then maybe someone needs to answer it." The room went cold. Velyazana stepped forward. Her voice clear. I will go. Murmurs rose like smoke. You are needed here. One elder snapped. I am needed there, she said. And I do not ask permission. She turned and walked away. Jack followed her into the night. He didn't speak. Not until they reached the cliffs where they'd once stood after the first firestorm. I'm coming with you, he said. Velyazana looked at him, not surprised. You are not Zarkith, she said. Jack shrugged, never claimed to be. She said nothing, but her hand, for just a moment, rested on his shoulder and didn't pull away. By morning, they were gone. The ship cut through Tarvok's clouds like a silver blade. Warriors watched from below, unsure if they had just lost a leader or gained a legend in the silence of space. Jack adjusted the controls while Velyazana stood behind him. He looked back. Are you ready? She didn't blink. I was born ready. The ship followed the map, each marker lighting up as they passed, old ruins floating in space. Derelict machines orbiting dead stars. They were being guided, not to a battlefield, but to a message left behind long ago. On the 5th day, they arrived, a hollow moon orbiting a black planet. Its surface was metal, carved with symbols that pulsed when they approached. This isn't a planet, Jack said. Scanning the readings, it's a vault. Velyazana stepped forward as the ramp lowered. The air was dry, but breathable. The silence was absolute. Inside, walls rose like canyon cliffs. Lights followed their steps, turning on as they passed. Then they found it at the center, a chamber of mirrors and glass. At the far end, a figure stood. Not alive, not dead, a projection, waiting. It spoke in 1,000 voices at once. We knew one would come, it said. Not Zarkith, not machine, but something born of both. Velyazana's hand hovered near her blade, but Jack stepped forward. What are you? The voice replied. We are the ones who fell, who built, who feared, who forgot. The lights dimmed, and a vision filled the room, a history of war, of creation, of monsters made to control, and of one who was meant to fix it. You were not meant to lead, the voice said to Velyazana, but you chose to. The mirrors cracked, not from force, but from truth, and through the cracks, something waited, something watching her, not as an enemy, but as an equal. The mirrors didn't just crack, they dissolved, one by one. The reflections faded, images of power, war, pain, glory, and then silence. Velyazana stood in the center of the ancient vault, surrounded by ghosts of the past. Her face held no fear. She was no longer just Zarkith. She was the answer to a forgotten question. Jack didn't speak. He simply watched her, knowing something was about to change. The voice returned, not as a chorus, but as a whisper. You are not our creation, it said. You are our correction. A beam of light rose from the floor, touching Velyazana's chest. She didn't flinch. The light did not burn. It scanned. Not her body, her choices, her soul. From above, 1,000 golden lines formed, curving and spinning through the air. A map, not of one world, but of hundreds. Stars, moons, vessels long lost, and ruins untouched for ages. Jack stepped forward slowly. This is a network, he said, eyes wide. The whisper responded. We were many, it said, until we became afraid. Velyazana looked at the map, her voice calm. You fought the stars. The voice agreed. We tried to rule them, and failed. The map shrank and folded into a small orb of light, floating between them. Then the whisper asked a question. Will you lead what we left behind? Velyazana said nothing at first. She looked at Jack. He gave a slow nod. Only if it's your choice, he said. She reached out and touched the orb. It melted into her hand like water and vanished. Suddenly, the room changed. Walls shifted. Light sharpened, and somewhere deep within the vault, machines began to wake. Not weapons, not this time. Archives, engines, memories. All waiting for a voice strong enough to call them forward again. Outside, in the sky above the dead moon, old satellites blinked to life. Signals stretched across light years. The stars were listening again. Jack looked at Velyazana. You just lit up half the galaxy. She stared ahead, quiet. They will come, she said. Jack nodded. Some for peace, some for war, she added. Back aboard their ship, the control panel lit up with new signals. Hundreds of ancient codes, coordinates. distress calls frozen in time. They were now connected to something far greater. Veliazana walked to the main deck and looked out the window. A fleet of old-world vessels hovered near the moon. Summoned from silence, none of them moved. They were waiting. Jack stood beside her. "So what now?" "Your Highness?" he asked with a grin. She raised an eyebrow. "I am not a queen." He smiled. "Then maybe just the strongest woman in the universe." She didn't deny it from the fleet. A single signal came through. Not words, not a threat, an invitation. Jack looked at her. "We answer?" Veliazana turned to him. Together, the ship turned, engines warming with ancient power. Behind them, Tarvok Prime stood still, its people watching the stars. Stories would be told of the warrior Jantas and the human who smiled at her. But those stories were only the beginning. As the ship jumped into light, the stars stretched, and beyond them waited a galaxy that remembered monsters, but would soon learn the names of to beings who chose something else, not conquest, not surrender, but a future written by their own hands. Veliazana of Tarvok, Jack Carter of Earth. Not just survivors, not just heroes, but the first of something new, and this time, the universe would not forget them.